Good afternoon. My name is Keisha Davis. I'm Director of Partnerships and Capacity Building with the Deaconess Foundation, and welcome to the Deaconess Center for Child Wellbeing. We're excited to have each of you here today in our space, our place of action, and thinking around ways that we can work together as partners to improve conditions for child well-being. If you've never been to our space before, we're excited to have you here, and we're always welcoming individuals and groups who are working to improve conditions for families throughout our region. If you're interested in doing so, the business card of David Flores is outside, and you're welcome to connect with him to learn more about how to access our space. But I, and along with a slew of other ladies here today, are participating in the 2020 Census Funder Pool, and we're excited to talk to you about ways and strategies that your organizations may be connecting with communities that have historically been underserved and have had limited access to participating in the census process, so that we can increase that for the 2020 census. And so we welcome you. We will have a few slides to run through the application process as well as the review process, and we also have representation from the Census Bureau. We'll have questions and answers at the end of our conversation today. And with that, I will turn it over to Alex Rankin with Missouri Foundation for Health.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say that we are so excited to see so many faces in the room today. As Keisha said, I'm Alex Rankin. I'm the Government Affairs Manager at Missouri Foundation for Health. We at MFH have been working to convene all sorts of stakeholders, including funders, over the last year to really get into 2020 census engagement and awareness. And so it's really great to see all of this kind of moving forward. And hopefully we can clarify some questions you might have. But please know that, there might be things that we don't have an exact answer to. And if we don't know, we understand in the review process that you might not know. And so we're going to, some of this is going to be a conversation, and we're going to have to kind of learn together and learn with the Census Bureau on this work. But it's important work, and we should all be, prepared to do it. So I am not going to take much of your time. I am going to pass it over to Elizabeth George from the St. Louis Community Foundation to go over the RFP and the application.
Thank you. And I'm going to put papers down. Whoops. And I'm going to go backwards as I put papers down. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for coming. We are really excited about today, because today is getting us to what we really want, which is that complete count. And we can only do a little bit, and you guys are going to be the ones that will do the really good and the really hard work. I want to say thank you to Alex, who has been sort of our leader through this process, and again to Keisha and Deaconess Foundation for hosting us here today. So I am going to, if I can, here we go. I'm going to talk about the RFP a little bit, and as I do so, I'm not going to read you everything on the RFP, because you have it, I hope, and will be able to access it online. But the first and most important thing to know is that what we are about today, and what we are about between now and the end of the census, is trying to make sure that every person in our region and in our state gets counted. And you see here the goals for the funding that we'll be providing, and they're on page 2 of the RFP. And in these goals, you'll see that they all come back to trying to make sure that our hard-to-count populations, the people who are most likely not to fill out the census, that you all can help us reach them, and you all can help us get them counted. So I do want to point out in the second goal that we talk about the 8 Missouri counties. And with those 8 counties, again, they're listed on page 2. We're talking about St. Louis City, St. Louis County, St. Charles, Jefferson, Franklin, Lincoln, and Warren and Washington. And we are not taking on Illinois for a number of different reasons, partially because Illinois has its own, what's it called? Illinois Count Me In. I do like their website is Ill Count Me In. So anyway, we decided we'll let Illinois deal with Illinois, and we'll work on this side of the region, and together we hope that we'll get everybody counted. So next up are, who are these hard to count populations? Who are we most trying to reach? And you see here, they're who you would think are going to be our hardest to reach, right? Communities of color, immigrants and refugees. And if you've been following the census at all, then you know that there is the whole discussion around the citizenship question. And as that played out, we heard that, yes, indeed, the reason for that citizenship question really was to try to keep immigrants and refugees from counting. And if we heard that, then you know that the community heard that, and that we want to really work hard to get our immigrants and refugees counted. Again, the census is about counting everyone living in the United States, not everyone who is a citizen or a resident of the United States. Low-income people are hard to count population. People experiencing homelessness. This makes sense. How do you find the people who are couch surfing, or the people who don't have a place to land on April 1st? Older people. And this is a little interesting because the census is online this year. And you'll have 3 opportunities to take it online before you get a paper census. So if you don't have a computer, or if you're not tech savvy, like many older people, and or if you don't have access to Wi-Fi, like many people who are living in low-income areas, then taking the census is going to be more difficult for you. Renters, people with mental or physical disabilities, non-English speakers, the people for whom just getting the census and understanding the census is going to be a little more difficult. Young people and LGBTQIA community. So all of this is listed on page 3 of the RFP. So let's talk a tiny bit about the funding itself. So grants, we've come up with a couple of different categories for grants. And as you look at this, you can say, oh, wow, up to $40,000. What we hope that you will do as you think about your proposal is to right size it with your organization, your reach into the community, who and what you will be doing, and who you will be trying to reach. So if you are a small neighborhood association and you're thinking about doing some outreach activities to your neighborhood, you might not need to be at $40,000, right? So just think about where you would fall within that. And we'll have a number of grants within each one of those ranges. And don't ask how many, because we don't know. So as Alex said, we don't have all the answers yet. We need to see what we get, right? Okay. So the timeline, September 4th, it has passed. That's when the RFP was announced or was released. You all are here, so somehow or another you found that, you got that. Today is today, the info session. October 15th is your deadline. Grant proposals are due at midnight. And after about 3 p.m., we cannot guarantee technical assistance with the online application. Okay? So if you wait until 11:50 to hit submit, nobody at the St. Louis Community Foundation will be awake to say, okay, so please be thoughtful about when you're hitting submit, because we want it to work well for you. The funding group is meeting in mid-November, and before the end of the month, we will be making our announcements of the funding. And then I am going to let Alex talk about the grantee webinar or learning session, because that is something that we're hoping to do, but I don't know that much about it.
So one thing that we understand is that there's going to be a lot of questions even when you do get the grant, if you get the grant. And we want to have those times where we check back in with you. We want to hopefully connect with the Census Bureau and talk to them about who should these groups be talking to in their area. Who is the representative? What are some things we need to consider? At that time, I will say, I didn't say it in the beginning, but Missouri Foundation for Health is developing a statewide messaging campaign, and we'll have messaging materials available. And so we will have more information on core messages for different hard-to-count populations that we hope to update you and give you some of that template language. So we don't have a date set for that, but just know that after award, we will check back in and do some learning. And it's not to say that if you are not awarded a grant, that we won't have other learning opportunities as well, other convenings, other meetings. We have a lot of expertise across our region to come in and do something, even if you don't get an award. So just keep that in mind. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, so let's talk about the nitty-gritty of actually how do I apply for this funding. The grant application is on the St. Louis Community Foundation website, and when we developed our website, we thought more clicks were better for some unknown reason. So if you have the grant application or the RFP, it gives the exact address, I believe, but what you're trying to do is get to the grants management page on the Community Foundation website. So www.givestl.org, then click on nonprofits, then apply for a grant, then click on learn more. It's this one-line page on our website. And then you'll get to the grants management page, and as you'll scroll down, it is the last of the grant programs that are listed. There's a blue tab for each grant program that we have. It's the last one, and you'll want to click there. And it will take you to a page with a lot of the information that's in the RFP, and at the very bottom of that page, there's a little red button that says application. And when you click on that, you'll go to our online application. And because I believe in transparency, I will tell you that we have very recently moved to an online application form using a system called Foundant. And the Census is our third grant application grant program that we are using Foundant for. So if things are a little funky, bear with us, give me a call, and we'll get to the bottom of it. So let me show you what happens when you click on application. You will come to a login page, and for the vast majority of you, you'll want to hit create a new page. If you have applied for one of the other two grants that we have, this is the third one, you will be one of the minority organizations that you can go to log in. And your profile information will automatically pop up. Did I see a question over here? Did you have a question? No? Okay. So the first thing that you will, whoops, I think I went too far. Let me see. Okay, so after you hit create a new account, you'll come to this page, and this is just basically your organizational information. And then you'll go to the next page, and it will, every time you finish a section, you'll get that little blue button and you'll hit next, and then you'll hit next, and then you'll hit next, and it'll take you all the way through. And again, this is just your profile information, your organizational, what I call demographics, that once you put this in, you don't ever have to again for whenever you apply for something through the St. Louis Community Foundation. So we're pretty excited about that. When you finish all of this, you'll get to the actual application. And we made a few copies, not enough for everybody, but we made a few copies of the application questions. But this is what you'll see, and you'll answer a question, and then when you finish, it'll bop you down to the next section, and then the next section, and then the next section. And there are actually 2 other sections that didn't fit the screenshot, and I didn't think you needed a whole nother slide. But the last 2 sections are your budget narrative and then your uploads, where you'll upload just a couple of documents that we asked for. The questions follow loosely, very loosely, the Common Grant 2 application, but we have adapted those pretty significantly for the census. So anyway, that is the application overview. Does anybody have any questions about the RFP, and we'll get into a little more depth on what we're looking for in a minute, but the RFP or the application? Yes, unfortunately, the Give STL Day is a different platform than our Foundant platform, and we're hoping that someday those will come together, but not yet. So, any other questions? Yeah, Allison. Great question. There are character limits, which are worse than word limits, but we tried to keep them long. We tried to not restrict you too much, and you can save as you go. And you can start your profile. We have 10 organizations as of this morning. I haven't looked this afternoon, but we have 10 organizations that already have gotten their profile up and said that they're planning on applying for the census funds. You can save as you go. You can start and go. You hit submit when you're ready to hit submit. But if you don't hit submit, we won't get the we may, if we're feeling generous, on October 16th, contact all of those who started an application but didn't get to submit and just see where you are with that. But yeah, hit submit, please. Other questions? Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Keisha.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I'm going to talk about the RFP review criteria. And pretty much you'll find that it aligns with a lot of the areas that Elizabeth covered relative to the goals and objectives for the combined funding pool, right? Making sure that your application clearly articulates who the hard-to-count population that you're looking to serve. Again, that's on page 2 or 3 within the RFP. Also, relative to service area and need, right, of those particular populations. We'll talk a little bit in the future relative to the geographic areas that are hard to count for our particular region. So when we think about the 7 counties that are within this funding pool, we'll talk more in depth about how you can get information about those particular regions or counties. Do the activities match the objectives of the proposal that you're submitting? So if you're saying you're going to do a particular slate of activities relative to outreach, to Elizabeth's point, within a particular neighborhood, did you really clearly articulate how you were going to do that? What do those steps look like? And does it make sense for your particular population? So don't make allusions to activities that don't align with the activities in the proposal framework that you've already detailed in your proposal. It all should make clear and distinct sense. Does the funding align with the activities? To Elizabeth's earlier point, does it make sense for you to spend the amount of dollars that you're requesting within the scope of the project? Do those dollars align with the activities that you are requesting support for? And so you shouldn't be necessarily asking for dollars that exceed the amount of activity and energy that your team will put out to your community outreach effort. And then what type of activity is being funded? I'm not sure on which particular page 3, there's a list of activities within the RFP that we're really hoping to see come through in your application submissions, right? So we really want to make sure that there are activities that are driving people to either participating in the online process for the census and or depending on the population, being able to access the hard copy paper as needed. Making sure that populations are aware that the census is an important process to participate in, right? And making sure that people feel comfortable with understanding how important the census process is for them and for our local community. And so please pay attention to that list of activities and whether or not your organization really has the capacity and the capability to implement activities that align with that list that is noted there. Not to say that that is the complete and definitive list, but those are activities that as a group and from the Census Bureau, we understand will be helpful in being able to drive down the hard to count figures. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Trina with Lutheran Foundation.
Okay, so I know it's late. So try to stay awake. I can't do any jumping jacks. I have on heels. But I do want to emphasize something here. So when we think about, I don't have the, oh, sorry. Looks like I needed lessons on here. When you think about allowable activities for this RFP, there's a handout that they had at the table. I'm not sure if you all picked this up, but this is a very helpful piece of information, mainly because we want to consider this as an opportunity to partner with the Census Bureau. And as partners, you want to know kind of what the parameters of that is. We're not trying to replace the work that they're doing. The last thing we want to do is confuse everyone else in the community about who is the Census Bureau and who are these organizations talking about the census. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about activities. So this particular document is helpful because it kind of outlines what it is and what it means to be a good partner with the census for this work. On the reverse side of it, they have just some suggestions in terms of how partners can support that work. So if you get a chance to review this, this would be great. And so some of the things that it talks about is trying to help people to understand the importance of the census is key. Helping to encourage people to actually respond to the census, if you can kind of demystify it, if you will, also dispel any other myths about the census. Assisting people who may have vision or hearing impairments. There's apparently a phone number that will be available where they can call in and complete the census that way. Allowing people to have access to tablets or computers so that they could fill out the census themselves. A couple of things that we don't want to do as partners is we don't want to create our own websites and start collecting census data, right? How confusing would that be? We also don't want to fill out anyone's census forms. That's not the idea of this. And even when we think about canvassing, which is up here as well, when we think about canvassing, if you're an organization that already goes around and you are canvassing for other causes, people know you in the community, you're a trusted resource within the community, and you're using this as an opportunity to promote the census, that makes sense, right? But if you're knocking on somebody's door and they don't know you from Adam, and you're promoting the census, how would they know, first of all, the difference between you and a census worker? Secondly, if they don't know you and if they don't trust you, then you could potentially be contributing to the reason why so many communities don't complete the census. And that's not what we're in the business of doing, right? We don't want to discourage participation by creating some confusion and then some trust issues around it. So we want to keep that in mind as we go through this. And as you think about activities in your proposal, you know, for me, it's really like three main categories. There's the education piece, where we're sharing with people the importance of the census. What does it mean? How does it impact your communities? How does it impact our state even? Also promotion, meaning that you're out there encouraging people to fill out the census. When it comes, fill out the census. Participate in the census. Those are kind of things that we want. Those are the things that are gonna get people to actually participate in this and be counted. Also, we want to think about things like technical assistance. Like I mentioned, access to computers or access to tablets to help people as they fill out or complete the census. And whatever other, when you think about language and the various languages that we have in our community, the Census Bureau also is going to be at that phone number I mentioned. Apparently, there are going to also be opportunities to access like 12 different languages. You may need to actually help people in accessing that phone line, giving them the information about that. That kind of stuff would be very helpful to folks. So it's just three main categories, really, if you were to break down all those. Even the examples that we gave is education, there's promotion, and there's technical assistance. Thank you. Keisha again.
I don't know why I'm on the mic this much. There's a couple of questions, and then we'll go on to the hard to count geographic areas. Let me take a mic because they might not be able to hear you.
So my question is, can we have census takers at our organizational events?
That might be a question for Margie, who is with the Census Bureau and who'll be coming up in a few moments. So just put a pin in that one. Any other questions? Yes. Thank you, Emily.
When you had up the criteria for it, there was specifically on the grant application, there are two questions. Two different sets of questions. One is about grant purpose and project purpose.
Yes.
And I needed a distinction between the two. And then there's another question about activities, but then there's also an additional question about outputs. So I wanted to know, how can you distinguish activities and outputs versus, and then also distinguish grant purpose and project purpose?
I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth.
Okay, and I'm frantically looking. So the grant purpose, if you look on page 2 of the RFP, it lists out those goals that we had up here, and we are asking you to identify which one of those goals that you want to, that you're planning on addressing. Thank you. That was a hard word on a Friday afternoon. And you can check as many as you would like to on that. So the project purpose is your, I'm teaching a class at WashU now, so I'm going to say that's your essay question. And that's where you will put some meat on that. You're going to tell us what you're going to be doing to meet the, or how you will be addressing that goal. Let's see, I'm trying to find the project purpose. And then the difference between activities and outputs. I mean, if you think about a good old-fashioned logic model, your activities are what you are doing. Your outputs are about, an estimate of how many people you will reach by doing those activities. Does that make sense? Pardon me? Or the results are your, outcomes. Yeah. Yeah.
My question is, what's covered in the grant? Is this like you can do a portion salary, admin, equipment, all of the above? Okay.
Any other questions? I think, yes, Ashley.
So the RFP mentions that activities can be done through May 2020, but when will nonprofits have the information they need to start the activities so we can kind of figure out how many months we would
I
have?
think on our timeline, we said we would let you know, did I go back? End of November.
Okay, so that's when we'd also be able to start pointing people to a website. I meant like, all those things being
Yes.
available. Okay, great.
All right, so I will go to our regional hard to count, just geographic areas. I won't stay here long because I know you probably have several questions. So when we think about the 8-county region, the hard to count counties, municipalities within that space would be St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and Washington County. At the end of this meeting, we will make sure to get you these slides because you'll see that there is an interactive map, and that is a live link for you to be able to drill down to the census tracts, right? So contrary to probably our natural inclination, we would think particular zip codes, right? But the census doesn't necessarily account for communities in that way. And so if you are able to click on these respective maps, for St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and Washington County, you'll be able to dive in a little bit deeper around particular hard to count areas within these specific counties. So with that being said, I am going to turn it over to Margie Williams with the Census Bureau, and then we'll do some Q&A, I'm sure.
Good afternoon. My name is Margie Williams, and I am a partnership specialist here in the St. Louis area. Actually, I'm one of the partnership specialists. We now have 4. I work with the local government organizations. We do have a community partnership specialist who works with community organizations. I represent the Chicago Regional Office, where our director is Mrs. Marilyn Standers, and we, at the Chicago Regional Office, we handle 8 different states out of the Chicago Regional Office. So I thank you for the invitation. Again, I'm here just to say we appreciate you guys being willing to help us out, because without partnerships with local communities, local governments, nonprofit organizations, we cannot reach everyone. So the purpose of the census, which I'm sure all of you know, is to count everyone in the United States on April 1st, 2020. Every 10 years, we are designated to count the population. So we want to count people of all ages, races, ethnic groups, citizens, non-citizens. If you live in our country on April 1st, 2020, you should be counted in the state, city, county, wherever you live. We will, again, a lot of things they've already told you. We'll have it in 12 different languages. But in addition to that, we have 59 language cards, language assisted cards. So if there is a language that, other than the 12 languages, we have language assisted cards. Also, our enumerators will carry handheld devices. And you know, those now technology allows you to toggle between different languages to make sure that we can communicate with whoever. And we are, of course, hiring. That's the stage we're in right now. We're making sure that we have people speaking multiple languages. So we're recruiting. We're in the recruiting phase right now. So if you know people who are interested in working for the census, we are hiring. At 2020census.gov, our rate is anywhere from $13.50 to $33 an hour. It depends on the position, and we have both part-time and full-time positions available. You had a question? I don't have an accurate number for this region. 33,000 for this region. And again, we handle 8 states. So we have Arkansas, Indy. You said this region. So our region is Arkansas, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Missouri, and of course, Illinois. Okay. But we also will have an office opening here in the St. Louis area, St. Louis County, which should open next month. We are currently hiring for that. You may see staff out on the ground now. We're in the address canvassing right now. That started in August 4th, and it'll end October 4th. So you may see census workers out in your neighborhood. And I believe you had a question about.
So we've already had some census employees reach out to us and ask if they could come to events. A lot of it right now has been promoting the hiring, but a few of the residents we have closer relationships with that were hired said that when they actually start taking them, could we have events where they would do that? So I didn't know if that was okay. And then my second question is, for a lot of our events, we also give incentives or compensation for people to come because we know we're taking time out of their day. If we were to do that and then there was also a census taker at that event, would it look like we are paying them to take the census? And is that okay? Like if we had an information session about the census, let's say we gave a $25 Visa gift card to people who participate, but then we also had census takers there where they could do it at the end, is that problematic?
Well, that's totally up to you how you do that. But yes, as far as your question of census workers being at your events, yes, that's fine. We encourage you all to ask us to show up to provide census information. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
If the census person is there with you at your event, could the census person actually help the person fill out the information, actually conduct the census there?
Yes.
That's your question, right? Yeah.
Yes. The answer is yes. Yes, ma'am.
Can we get more information on the local canvassing events that are happening right now so that we can inform our, I work with immigrants and refugees, so I definitely want to inform them of who might be knocking at their door and why.
So right now we're in the address canvassing phase where we're verifying addresses where anyone, and not everyone's door will be knocked on. Actually, the majority of our address canvassers will just be looking from the walking block to block. They won't be knocking on doors. But what we do when we come into a community, we notify the local authorities. So the local police officers know that we are canvassing in your area. So that is a way of letting them know.
Just a clarity question when she asked about incentives. So can you give someone that is completing the census an incentive to complete that?
We don't, but you can do whatever with your funding, but we don't pay people to complete the census. We do encourage people to respond, of course, because of the importance of the census, and that's what we are partnering with, like I said, partnering with you all to make sure that people understand the importance of the census, that there is $675 billion distributed annually based on population. So you want to make sure you get a full, accurate count in your community. Again, you guys want to target the people who are less likely to respond to the census. And one thing I will say, I know that they mentioned about the hard to count areas. So one thing you might want to look at as you're doing your proposal is go to census.gov/ROAM. So that will give you, you can drill all the way down to street level to look at the low response score. It'll give you a lot of the demographics about the tracts that you're looking in or wanting to target. Talks about the percentage of renters, talks about the percentage of 18 to 24. Children 0 to 5 are the most undercounted, so you want to make sure you target those. But anyway, if you go to census.gov/Rome, you can look at our information, and this is based on the American Community Survey and a 5-year look on, and it's the forecast. So that low response score that you'll see is the forecast. Who we are forecasting will not self-respond to the census on April 1st, 2020. And again, we want you guys to make sure, right now we're in the education phase. So, and I like what you said, we have, at the census, we talk about the 3 E's: educate, encourage, and engage.
So just
So I
on
think-
that, and thank you, to Keisha, to the reviewers.
Yes.
You all are acceptant of incentives for families to participate.
So we're hoping that you make a case for why it makes sense to the particular population you're trying to encourage to participate. We're willing to consider that, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Alex. She has a few things that she's going to share with you, and then we'll go crazy on Q&A, I swear.
Yeah, so I just wanted to note a couple of things. So one of the reasons that we really wanted to have Margie come, and thank you so much for the short notice coming to this meeting, is one, we want you to familiarize yourself with who from the Census Bureau is working in our region and working in your communities. One thing we hope to do, and we're working with the Census Bureau, is to put together a public-facing list that you guys can have access to as to who's going to be working at the community level and who's going to be working, with the governments and the leaders, okay, so that you guys can engage the right person to work with. Also, again, there might be some of these technical questions where if it's to do with the fund, we can answer. If it's to do with census operations, we're going to bring Margie back in. And okay, so we want to just let you know, if we don't have an answer to something today, we will get it to you. Sometimes we have to go back and ask other people at the Census Bureau or think through it. We get new questions every time we do a census event, so bear with us. But with that, we're going to open it up to Q&A. I think we have Emily is going to facilitate that, and I'm going to run Mike. Jamie. Oh, okay. And Jamie.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think Lori had a question right here, and then we'll work our way. I'll work my way back. I had a quick one for this census representative. In 2010, we had quite a lot of multi-language materials, posters, and census forms and multi-language. Is that still going to be available, and when does that happen?
Sure, it is available now.
We had pallets of information like delivered to us at the government centers and that sort of thing. Are you talking about just downloading material, or will we be able to request?
You can request it, as well as we'll have it in electronic form. And we just recently got our tagline about 2 months ago, so now we're really starting to increase information or flyers in multiple languages.
We have a question in the back. Kelly, if you want to grab, and then I'll come back here.
I was a field operations supervisor for Census 2010. Absolutely loved it. Highly recommend it. First question is on if the Bureau has determined the funding and where the questionnaire assistance centers might be, or where the kiosks might be for this time around. And then the second is less of a question and more of a pitch. My organization and Jeffrey's organization, Vitendo for Africa, we're hosting a census training with trainers from New York and DC tomorrow at WashU, and the trainer runs New York City's Complete Counts Committee. So she's spent 2 years dealing with immigrant communities, hard to count, 80+ organizations across New York City. So opening it up to folks who want to work with immigrant communities, hard to count communities. So I've got flyers outside, but I don't actually have enough flyers. Thank you.
So as far as locations, no, we don't have those. There will be 4 centers, because this time you will be able to respond to the census for the first time in 3 different ways. We're trying to make it easier for people to respond anytime, anywhere. So you'll be able to respond online, as well as call into one of our phone centers, or the traditional way, which is mail in, fill out your form and mail it back. 95% of the households will receive information through the mail. The other 5% will be personally visited by United States Postal Office or representative or an enumerator going to your door and knocking.
Okay, I have a question. Many of us serve the same clients who are immigrants and refugees. And maybe this is a stupid question. How will you make sure that if we're having an event and the census taker is taking their census right then and there, that they haven't already, is it because it's online? Is that how it will be prevented from duplicate?
So you can, like I said, there's one of three ways. So you can respond online. So we of course have taken into account that there could possibly be duplication. So one will fall out. So because the same thing could happen, not just through immigrants or having an event, but if the parent answers this, mom answers the census, dad answers it, as long as those two are correct or the same, the information's the same. Say you said mom says there's 4 people living here, dad says there are 3, then that's when we have an enumerator knock on the door to verify the accuracy. If they both are the same, mom says 4, dad says 4, then one just falls out.
Okay, so if somebody were to complete a census with guidance in one organization and then heard of an incentive somewhere else and had a chance to fill it out at another organization, is there a way that the system will?
Yes, it will file. It will. Yeah, duplicates will be.
It's all going to be online.
Not all online. Again, you have 3 ways to respond.
No, I understand. I'm sorry, but I mean, someone will be dealing with duplicates.
Yes,
Okay,
yes. We have something in place to make one of those fall out.
Okay, got it. And then the second question I have, I remember in 2010, a big truck came, a mobile census truck, it was wonderful. Is that one of the tools that's happening this year?
Yes.
Okay, one of those big.
The mobile van will come through the states to help promote census awareness as well. And then when you all have events that if you'll let us know that you're having an event, we have recruiting assistants, we have partnership specialists. As we move forward, we'll bring on additional staff. But if you let us know what's going on at an event, we can send you out different promotional items and things you might need to help your event.
So this is low-hanging fruit, but with the 95% of people receiving it via mail, do they receive a postage or paid postage to mail it back? Yes. Okay, so there's a paid postage envelope. Right.
That's going to give you instructions of how to respond online. And then if you don't respond online, you'll get 3 different opportunities to respond online before we send out the paper form and then the person that comes to knock on your door. And that non-response follow-up operation happens at the end of April up until August of 2020.
Okay, so the paper form isn't mailed automatically. They have to request the paper form.
We have identified areas where there's like little internet connection, and if you go to that Rome, that census.gov Rome, that one of the demographics tells you how many of the percentage of households that have access to internet and broadband or smartphones in their homes. Like I said, it's a very good tool. So we've identified certain areas where we know there's poor internet connection or no internet connection. And that's why you have the option of filling out the form or calling into a phone center. And we've also teamed up with local libraries and to make sure that they are allowing people to apply or respond rather online as well.
Okay, my simple question is that if I receive a form in the mail, it's going to either come with a postage or an envelope for me to mail it back?
Yes.
Paid, okay. Thank you.
Yes. So we have a question up here, and then we'll take the gentleman back here, and then.
I live in a neighborhood that's really sparsely populated, and so I keep having this fantasy of going around mid-May door to door and saying, have you responded? Would you want to use my phone or this tablet to respond? But I'm getting the idea you don't want us to do that.
We're hoping that your committees or you partnering with us, you'll give out the information so people will respond, so no one has to go and knock on their door. It's the same thing with people thinking that we're trying to be not wanting to respond to the government or whatever, want someone coming to knock on their door, just tell them, fill out the form. We won't have to come knock on your door. You won't have to be bothered with the census person as long as you fill out the form in advance. And hopefully everyone fills it out by April 1st, 2020. You'll start receiving the forms mid-March, somewhere between March 12th and 20th. We'll start mailing out that information. And then, of course, we want you to respond by April.
You just spoke about the calendar of events. I want to kind of stay at a higher level there. You said right now we're in the canvassing phase. Can you kind of go through the calendar of what happens when for us? I know you can't, not date specific, but what happens in December, what happens in March, so as we're preparing our proposals, we're in line with what's going on with the census itself.
Yeah, sure. Alex wanted me to remind everyone that we will be sending out information regarding the timeline and other materials to this group. And so look for those things to come out, and certainly use all of the resources on census.gov as well. So you'll find a wealth of information there, and you can align your activities with, the timeline. So.
All the timelines and everything. It's a large document, but anything you want to know about 2020 census, go to census.gov and look at the 2020 operational plan.
And if you want to look at a kind of a snapshot version of that, there are electronic timelines. So the big things to note is right now you have address canvassing going on, which I do think it's important to just note in your neighborhoods. And I know Clayton put out stuff for their residents. It's not the same thing as the decennial census, so let's just know that. The main point of focus should really be getting people to respond during self-response phase, which is that mid-March through end of April period. There will be opportunities for you guys to do and support non-response follow-up and make sure there's, those communities that are hard to count that didn't, respond during self-response. You can get out, and that goes through August. But the majority of your work should be looking at ramp up from, when the grant is awarded to end of self-response. That should really be the focus of your work. And I'm sorry that we didn't make that clearer until now, but we will send up, one of the reasons we verified everyone's email is to send you guys this information. And if we miss any information, we'll continue to send that to you.
Hey, I have a question. Can you access the link to the census to complete the form through a web browser on your cell phone? You can?
The answer was yes. Let me grab, I know she's patiently waiting over here.
What the grant reporting requirements will be for this?
So remember at the beginning when Alex said, we don't have all the answers yet? There will be a grant reporting, and of course, budget will always be part of that, and we will likely ask for what activities you actually did and accomplished and how many you reached and that kind of thing, but we have not yet written that grant report. Yes.
I just have a question. I have a granddaughter who's in college. Who fills out her census, her parents or her? She does.
The colleges know this, and the colleges want people counted at the college because, again, federal funding, and if they're, my daughter's in Wisconsin, I'd rather have her be counted in Missouri because I want more people in Missouri than Wisconsin, right? Let me tell you, her college is going to say, no, you're going to be counted here.
So there's been several mentions of information materials that we'll be getting. Does that include yard signs, or would that be an additional expense the organization would have to incur?
Yes, we have yard signs.
Kelly's going to grab you. Yeah.
My question is, how would we get information about the mobile van so it can come out to some of our events?
Once we Once we come through Missouri, we will send out information, but that, like that mobile activity probably will not happen until like January of 2020. That's when we'll really
So with the dates that are running around, the ones that stuck out to me is that the self-reporting is mid-March to mid-April. Does that mean that prior to that, folks cannot fill out a form online, so the online census forms won't actually open up until mid-March, correct?
Are we allowed to continue education and outreach during the time of the application being open?
The application, meaning the census or the, yes, yes.
all the way up until August of 2020 when the non-response follow-up ends.
I think Jess has a question.
Hi. So what does the technical assistance look like for the outreach phase? What does that consist of? That was one of the 3 points: education, promotion, and technical assistance.
Yeah, I think this one of the things that Trina mentioned. So it's just talking about if you want to provide technical assistance, like some language assistance, or help people that might need assistance if they have some sort of disability and need help accessing the form or accessing internet to submit the form. Those are all included as examples of things that you can do that's in the RFP. But again, it's not an exhaustive list. So if you know you serve a population that we're just not thinking of, and you can think of ways that you can best, promote or provide that assistance to that population to help them fill out their census form, that's totally fine. Please don't feel confined by the examples that we put in there. We just tried to get the juices flowing, but we understand that, your population best. So if you think certain things might work for them, just put it in there and put the rationale as to why you think it'll work.
I have a related question. So for homeless populations, for example, the technical assistance that we could provide, what would that maybe look like? Could it be electronic access?
That, I would say that that's a very particular population that if the Census Bureau has an operational function and approach as to how they will reach out to the homeless population. If you are a group that serves that population, then you should think about how you incorporate that work into the work that you already do. If you don't already serve that population, I wouldn't think that that's where you should be. I would think that's where we defer to the Census Bureau operations and plan, because that has been planned for a while.
Allison has a question.
So I don't have a question, I have a comment. So I'm with Parents as Teachers, and our focus is on children 6 and under because they're really missed in the counts. We have our international conference here in the middle of October, and one of our mini plenaries will be on the census and particularly the importance of counting young children. We have someone with Count All Kids campaign, a representative from NALEO, the Latino elected officials, and the National Congress of American Indians. The conference registration is full, but we're going to be live streaming that particular mini plenary, and it's Wednesday the 16th from 9 to 11, and I don't have more details than that, but I can get that to you guys and you can get it out.
Great, thanks, Allison. Oh, one more here.
So, do you have to receive a personal invitation to complete the census online, or can you, I know you mentioned that it'll be available in mid-March. Can people just kind of go on there in mid-March and just complete it, or will they have to wait before they receive an official invitation through the postcard in the mail?
You can start responding as soon as it goes live and it's available. You do not have to wait for an invitation. You will start seeing our national campaign starting in January, and it'll tell you the dates as to when you can start responding.
I believe like one example of this is, and you might have mentioned it, but like in libraries, they are hoping to put that website or the place where you can respond online maybe on like the homepage. So when someone goes in and wants to, do whatever they want to do with the library, they also are reminded and prompted to do it there. So if you have capabilities at your organization, at your clinic, at your schools, like these are things to think about.
I have a question about the application itself. So I work at an organization. We service children, youth, and families. And in my mind, I've got two areas that we could probably focus on. Is it beneficial to just focus on one more than the other? Could it be an application written to where it is focusing on like families with children under the age of 5, like birth to 5, and then also like a homeless population?
That's a great question, and youth in need. There are a few other very large organizations here, and I would like to get back to you after we have a chance to think about that. My natural reaction would be, oh, well, you could, do both, but I want to make sure that we're aligned in that before answering.
So I had a question about working with the immigrant population, and of course the citizenship question, compounded with the anti-immigrant climate in the country right now. I can see that being a huge barrier for the immigrant populations. So my question was, if we're promoting our immigrant populations actually filling out the census, have there been materials developed by the Census Bureau or by the group that would help us actually kind of making our populations feel comfortable and actually trust filling out the Census Bureau and that information not being used to actually target them?
Great question. So in the materials that are being developed through the MFH campaign, we have core messages for different populations, and that is one population that we're looking at core messages that have already been tested at a national level and at a state level. And it's going to reinforce the safety, the security, the confidentiality of the process. But again, those messages just coming from us, not valuable. Those messages have to come from the organizations that serve those populations and that are trusted by those populations. So use those messages when they become available at end of October, November. Please.
So getting to her question, just kind of a thought, is that those messages would come from national and they would MFH as well as being tested. But that does not necessarily speak to those that oversee that, be the government. In terms of being trusted and things like that, that's coming from MFH, that's coming from a national public messaging. So how do they feel that it's trusted when it's not coming from the government itself, those that have the ability to impact their lives, if that makes sense? I guess it doesn't make sense.
I need a little more clarity on the question.
I think
it's not on there, one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the census has reinforced the confidentiality and the safety of the form, filling out the form as well.
And I think and I just want to piggyback on what Margie said, because I think that's really important, is, earlier we said something about, if you haven't worked with the homeless before, this isn't the time to start. So, if I were to show up in the middle of one of, Jason's meetings with the people that he works with, or at Southside at 10 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. when parents are dropping off, and I were to say, hey, I want you to fill this out, they'd probably look at me like, no. But this is where your trusted partners come in. And if that trust is already there, and someone and your that trusted partner is saying it's going to be okay, they're not going to look at your particular data, it'll be aggregated up, then that, and whatever messaging that MFH is testing, then I think it's different than someone you don't know.
And I get that. It's the thing about it is that, Deborah, they trust you. I say something and ISIS shows up at their door. I don't control ISIS. But that, I understand. But my real question, that just made me kind of think about that. But my real question had to do with the question before that, where there's going to be overlap because we're serving similar populations, the same schools. That's really where I want to get to. So if that happens and we all have credible applications, is more better than less? So if we're all at the same school, ideally, and we all have credible proposals, how will you all make that distinction? And that may be a discussion to be had. I'm just asking that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and we know that that's a pretty big likelihood. So a couple of things. We're going to have to see what we get and what populations are being targeted and who's applying. So it's kind of in the description and in the narrative and in the application to say, we serve this population, we are targeting this hard to count, and this is why we're the best choice to do that. I would urge all of you, and we have actually allocated some time at the end of this meeting at 3:30 on a Friday, for you to look around the room, and you'll probably see a lot of familiar faces, but say, what are you guys doing? I know we serve the same population, so how could we partner together? I think we would like to see coordination and partnership where possible. We get that sometimes it might just be your own organization and you have these big events that you want to do something census related, that's fine. But I think it makes sense that if you have multiple organizations that are hitting a population, to try to work together. I just want to clarify, and I think it'll be on all of us in this room to reinforce this fact, okay? So we know that the citizenship question is not on there. We know that the damage has been done in some ways. And so it's on all of us to make sure people have the information about the fact that it's confidential, safe, protected. There are fact sheets on the Census Bureau's website that talk about Title 13 and how it's your information is protected by federal law. There are like penalties for Census Bureau if they release that information. None of that information can be used against you in any legal proceeding, period. And so, again, we'll have messaging to reinforce that, but I really hope that everyone in this room starts to familiarize yourself with that because, again, coming from you, that's going to make a difference way more than it is coming from me or any of us. Sure.
Can you make a fact sheet for organizations with that legal information on it?
Yep. I am not your lawyer. No, we will have information like that, yes.
What's the size of your reviewer pool, and how does that play into the weight that collaborative proposals and approaches might have?
So, 9 out of the 10 funders make up the reviewer pool, and we each, I think, are bringing one person, and what we have said is for a couple of our other partners, so Gateway Center for Giving, Kelly is here from GCG, they're not a funder, so they are welcome to be at the table, but they'll have voice, no vote. And if I were to bring somebody else from the St. Louis Community Foundation, that person would have voice, no vote. But it'll be 9 of the 10 funding partners that will be making the decision. And we all have equal weight. Some of us have louder voices.
No, my concern was more about the volume of applications that I
Oh.
think you received. Just judging by people that have been contacting
Yeah.
our organization, I think the interest
Right.
is certainly out there and maybe greater than what was anticipated.
I don't know that it's going to be greater than what was anticipated because we're a little nervous. And we do anticipate that there will be some, we're not all going to read every application for, or have, let me reframe that. It would be great if we could all read every application. But we will be, each of, it might be 2 of us taking, this is your pool that you will be in charge of making sure you've gone through all the financials and you've done all that nitty gritty and then bringing that to the table. So we know there's a lot of interest. Remember, $350,000, $2,000 to $40,000. Not everybody's going to get a $40,000 grant. Yeah, thank you.
We'll be sure to have snacks.
And on November 10th, think of us because we're going to be frantically reading the last of the applications. Pardon me? 2 more questions. I thought I saw a hand back there. Okay, okay. One here and one here.
So our organization makes extensive use of interpreters. Will the grant allow for payment for those interpreters?
Yes, and as with anything, just justify the need for those interpreters. And I think particularly, there are 12 languages that the census will be translated into, and information will be available. So be familiar with those, and we recognize there are a whole lot more than 12 languages spoken in the country and in St. Louis. So.
So there's been a lot of talk about these materials that Census has put together for promotional stuff. My question is, how valuable is the distribution of those materials versus us adding? I feel like I'm ruining the last question. Versus us adding you want us to distribute the materials that Census has already created versus creating new materials, or no?
There's 2 things going on. So the Census Bureau has materials. They're great. They're very nationally focused. MFH will have state-based materials, and we understand that if it has your logo or your, branding on it, it's going to be more meaningful. So we want you to use the core messages, use the template language, but feel free to brand it as your organization, because that's where the trust is. We do hope that you'll use, there will be a tagline and some hashtags. And the more that we can have consistency, I think that's better, because then you're hearing it multiple times, hopefully from multiple organizations that you trust. But I know it's confusing, and I know it's hard because we don't have some of those available. But we understand that you might want to do some stuff on your own. So just incorporate that, but just understand that there's going to be stuff developed that's already been researched, just because we know that nonprofits and government and quasi-government entities don't have a ton of resources to do that. So we just tried to do some of that ahead of time for you.
Great, that's helpful. Thanks.
Any more questions? So thank you. You guys have, yes, Elizabeth.
Monday or Tuesday, the slides will go up on our website under that tab for the St. Louis Regional Census Fund.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, Margie. I want Margie to have the last word because she is with the Census Bureau.
I just have one last thing. If you're not granted a grant, please join someone else. team up with the Complete Count Committee in your area, with your community or local government, because of course, making sure we have a full accurate count benefits all of us. There's so many different programs that the census population is tied to. So again, don't feel bad if you don't get it, but make sure you team up and join a Complete Count Committee. Make sure, try not to reinvent the wheel. So if you have things going on at the church, if you have Christmas dinner or turkey giveaways, stuff some census information in there. Halloween, trick or treat, trunk or treat, I guess I should say. I'm just saying, don't try and reinvent the wheel. Your newsletters, any events that you're at, just give a 2-minute spiel about the census and the importance of making sure everyone is counted so that we get the full $675 billion distributed annually based on population in the state of Missouri.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So we have some opportunity for you guys to connect with one another around potential partnership. You're certainly welcome to stay here in this space. And we thank you for coming out. We will follow up with materials, as we mentioned, so you make sure that you have the information needed to make a strong application. And as always, if you have any questions, there's some follow-up emails to either Alex and or Elizabeth to support you up into our due date. So thank you so much and have a great weekend, guys.